How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday, Yom Rishon. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Sunday? Yehud in South Carolina, Joe in Southern California, Bill in mid-Missouri, Lorraine in Texas, Bella in Florida, Melissa in Great Neck, Guy in Ohio, Joe in the Inland Empire, Karen in Northern California, Randy in Florida, Chaim in Florida, Samantha in Washington State, Marjorie in Georgia, Joseph in Nevada, and Spencer in Connecticut. Welcome, everybody. And thanks to everybody who writes their names at the top of the hour. It's really, whenever you comment, it just, the algorithm pushes our class out further, enables more people to bump into it and become another accidental Talmudist like us. Beautiful teaching tonight. Let's get into it. Our daf is page 123 here in Tractate Bava Basra, the 23rd volume of the Talmud. We're making our way through chapter 8 tonight, opening Mishna number 4, and we're actually picking that up actually about a third of the way down the previous page, page 122b, because we had a double daf yesterday. After all those days that we missed because of the Chagim, because of the holidays, luckily we had done a bunch of doubles before, so we're only one page behind. However, we'll have class, obviously right now, normal time Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, but we're going to be off Wednesday and Thursday of this week because I'm flying to Austin, Texas, where our film, Guns N' Moses, will be the opening night gala of the Austin Jewish Film Festival. So if you live in Austin or if you have friends in Austin, tell them to come out. It's going to be a great night. Wonderful screening. The folks down there, I think, are doing a terrific job planning that event. So that's on Thursday night, Halloween. I'm flying down a day early to make sure everything goes smoothly. So no class Wednesday, Thursday, but I'm flying back very early on Friday morning. So with God's help, we'll have our class at the regular Friday time of noon Pacific, and we'll only be missing Wednesday and Thursday. Also, we are in our annual campaign. It is now beginning. I'm not going to make a big pitch right now. You guys know what we do every day here at AT Daily. But we also put out an astonishing amount of content, doing such large part to Nina. She just does an amazing job with that weekly newsletter. There's always a couple of vorts, a couple of beautiful teachings on the weekly Torah portion, the weekly hero, the Thursday hero. I contribute a joke every week, at least one. We've grown our Instagram following from 10,000 followers to 170,000 in the last year. And so many people there have said, yeah, came for the jokes, stayed for the Torah. And the silver lining of the tragedy a year ago, October 7th, is that there's just been so many people who are waking up to their heritage, Jews that are newly interested in Judaism, and non-Jews who are curious about Jewish wisdom, which is so universal and relevant to everybody. We are a nonprofit. It costs money to put out so much content. We launched the app. Hopefully you have the app. The app is great. And among other things, it will notify you when we go live on AT Daily. It also has the beautiful Zmanim, right? The daily halachic times, and all the content that's on our website, from the heroes, the Torah teachings, AT Daily, the key dafs, like I said, the humor, inspirational quotes. It's called memes. We're going to rename that inspirational quotes. There's just so much content that we create. It's such a benefit to so many people. So when you donate to our 501c3 nonprofit, you know that you're getting tremendous bang for your buck in donation. I mean, you know, we are sharing Torah with so many people that would not be receiving it otherwise. So please donate, and donate generously. And Nina will put the donation link in the comments, but it's so easy. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. We really would like to see everyone, you know, who's with us every day in AT Daily join the annual campaign, if possible, to whatever your capacity allows. Okay. Mishnah number 4 here, picking it up on 122b, and our daf today's page 123. Mishnah 4. Of chapter 8. Both the son and the daughter of the deceased are included in the laws, the halachas, of inheritance. But the difference is that the firstborn son takes a double portion of the property of the father, and he does not take a double portion of the property of the mother. And another difference is that the daughters are sustained from the property of the father after he dies, as it is a mandatory condition of their mother's marriage contract that the daughters are to be sustained even before the estate is dispersed to the children. But the daughters are not sustained from the property of the mother, which is all inherited by the sons. That's Mishnah 4. Now the Gemara analyzes this Mishnah. What is meant by the first clause of our Mishnah? Both the son and the daughter of the deceased are included in the laws of inheritance. If we say that they inherit together, well, didn't we already learn in a Mishnah on page 115 that a son precedes a daughter? Additionally, all descendants of a son precede a daughter. Even the daughters of the son will precede daughters of the deceased, meaning the granddaughters of the deceased via his son will precede his own daughters. We already learned that. So it is clear that if there's a son and a daughter, the daughter does not inherit alongside her brother. So we've already learned that. So Navsham is a mnemonic for the names of the sages cited in this discussion which now follows. If you were memorizing the entire Gemara, this would be very useful to you. Nachman Papa Ashi Mar. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Both the son and the daughter take in inheritance the property due to their father, as they would take in inheritance the property that he had in his possession. Now here, this is what we've been talking about, at least in terms of the generation that came out of Egypt. And we said that somebody who came out of Egypt, even if he didn't survive to reach the promised land, which is most of the adults, right, that came out, still there was a piece of land that was due to them. And even though they never received it, it never entered their possession because they never reached the promised land, nevertheless, their children will inherit that portion. And if their father was a brother among other brothers, and he was the firstborn, so he would get a double portion, and his children would inherit that double portion, meaning twice as much as what their cousins would inherit. So what are we learning that's new here? The Gemara questions this explanation. We already learned this as well in a Mishnah on page 116b. Zelophehad's daughters took 3 portions of land in the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, right? Once they finally reached the promised land. What did they take? Their father's portion that he received because he was among those who left Egypt. Adult came out of Egypt, was due a piece of land, even though he never made it to the promised land, because he came out of Egypt and was counted in that census, he was, it says, if it was due to him, right, because God gave it to him, and though he never actually formally came into possession of it because he died before reaching the promised land, his daughters would inherit that portion of land. So that's one portion. And his portion that he received with his brothers in the property of Heifer, their father. Although Zelophehad predeceased his father and never was in possession of the inheritance from Heifer, and an additional portion that he received from Heifer, right? Zelophehad's father was Heifer, and then it's his daughters who bring the whole question to Moshe, who brings it to God. So the Heifer was the daughters of Zelophehad's, their grandfather, and an additional portion that he received from Heifer because Zelophehad was the firstborn. Now, it is already taught in that Mishnah that property due to the deceased is inherited in the same manner as property that was already in the possession of the deceased. And furthermore, if the explanation of the Mishnah is as stated by Rav Nachman, well, what is meant by the phrase, but the difference is that the firstborn son takes a double portion of the property of the father and he does not take a double portion of the property of the mother? According to Rav Nachman's explanation, what is the contrast between the two clauses in the Mishnah? So rather, Rav Papa said, this is what our Mishnah is saying. Both the son and the daughter of the deceased take a portion of the firstborn. Now the Gemara questions this. We already learned this also in the Mishnah on page 116b, which explains the third portion taken by the daughters of Zelophehad. And they took an additional portion that he received from Heifer as he was a firstborn, and a firstborn takes two portions of inheritance from his father. And furthermore, if the explanation of the Mishnah is as stated by Rav Papa, what is meant by the phrase, but the difference is that the firstborn son takes a double portion of the property of the father and he does not take a double portion of the property of the mother. According to this explanation as well, the first clause of the Mishnah has nothing to do with inheriting from the mother. So rather, Rav Ashi said, this is what our Mishnah is saying. With regard to both the son among the sons and a daughter among the daughters, if the father says, this particular child shall inherit all my property, his statement stands. A father can do so for any one son, or when there are no sons, for any one daughter. If a father wants to play favorites and say, this was the child that took care of me and, didn't abandon me, and I want all of my property to go to this particular son, he can do that. Now, the Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion does Rav Ashi say this? Is it in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka? The Gemara challenges, but the Mishnah teaches this later in page 130a when we come to it. As Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says, if one said about another who is fit to inherit from him that the named individual should inherit all his property, his statement stands. But if one said it about another who is unfit to inherit from him, his statement does not stand. It is not reasonable to say that this Mishnah is stating the same law that is recorded in that later Mishnah in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. And if you would say that the Tana here in our Mishnah taught us an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, in order to demonstrate that his opinion is accepted as halacha, well, this would not establish the halacha in accordance with his opinion. And the reason is that this would be an instance of an unattributed Mishnah and thereafter a Mishnaic dispute concerning the same matter. As in the latter Mishnah, there is a Tana who disagrees with the ruling of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. And when you have an unattributed Mishnah and thereafter a Mishnaic dispute, the halacha is not in accordance with the unattributed Mishnah. Right? Normally, when there's an unattributed Mishnah, we assume that that is the halacha, not just the ruling of whoever said it, but that because it was unattributed and unchallenged, that is the law. But when it's unattributed and then challenged, we're going to have to dig deeper to figure out exactly what is the law. And furthermore, if the explanation of the Mishnah is as stated by Rav Ashi, so what is meant by the clause? But the difference is that the firstborn son takes a double portion of the property of the father, and he does not take a double portion of the property of the mother. According to this explanation as well, the first clause of the Mishnah has nothing to do with inheriting from the mother. So rather, Mar bar Rav Ashi said, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Both the son and the daughter are equal in their rights, both with regard to the property of the mother and with regard to the property of the father. Sons and daughters can inherit from either fathers or mothers. But the differences are that the firstborn son takes a double portion of the property of the father, and he does not take a double portion of the property of the mother, and that the daughters are sustained from their father's estate before it is dispersed to the children, but they are not sustained from the property of their mother. This does not contradict the more general principle that sons inherit ahead of daughters when you just have a brother and sister. They're talking about here whether they can inherit, from a mother and from a father. Different kind of question. Now, the sages taught in a Baraisa, when the verse states about a man who is leaving an inheritance, but he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the hated, meaning the hated wife, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. This means the firstborn son receives double the property received by any other one inheritor. So the Baraisa analyzes this statement. Do you say the firstborn receives double the property received by any one inheritor? Or perhaps, or rather, is it a double portion of all the property, such that the firstborn son receives 2/3 of the entire estate, which is twice the portion left for the other inheritors, and then they divide that final third between them? That's tough on the other brothers, right? Let's say there's 5 brothers. So according to this, if there were 5 brothers, the oldest would receive 2/3 of the whole estate, and the other 4 brothers would divide up the last third. So they would each get 1/4 of 1/3, whereas their oldest brother gets 2/3 of the total. Really unfair outcome. Now, before we think that that's impossible, I think if you look, I'm sure our history people, Bill will probably know, but my understanding is, there would, because like when you're talking about the aristocracy, in Great Britain, this would not be an unfamiliar outcome. Because what they want is that the estate remains, right, in one person. So the oldest really, he becomes the next baron or the marquis or whatever. And he gets the vast bulk of the estate. And those younger brothers are left to fend for themselves. They're not going to be poor. They're not going to be, just homeless. But they're not going to get nearly what the oldest gets. However, that's not how the Torah does it. The oldest gets a double portion, and what that means is he's going to get twice as much as any other single inheritor. So if, for example, there are 5 sons, you divide the estate into 6 parts. It's always the number of brothers plus 1. Why plus 1? Because the oldest gets a double portion. So if there were 5 brothers, you would divide the estate into 6 parts. The oldest brother would get 2/6, and everybody else would get 1/6, right? So he gets twice as much as any other single brother, but it's not like he takes the vast bulk of the estate for himself and the others are left, to divide into little pieces, just that remaining third. That is not the law. However, how do we know that? Let's keep reading. And the Baraisa suggests, and this question of are we going to do, that he just gets twice as much as any other single inheritor, but they basically all divide it up. Or is he getting 2/3 for himself and the rest of them divide up that last third? How do we do this? And the Baraisa suggests, and this question can be resolved through a logical inference. Now we're on page 123a. There may be times when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance, dividing the estate with one other brother. And there may be times when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance, dividing the estate with 5 brothers. And there's no indication that the Torah differentiates between the manner in which the respective firstborns collect in each scenario. Therefore, just as when a firstborn takes his portion with one other brother, he receives double the property received by one inheritor. He gets 2/3, the other brother gets 1/3. So too, when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance with 5 brothers, he he receives double whatever any single inheritor receives. So like I said, if it's 5 brothers total, he gets 2/6, everybody else gets 1/6. Now the Brisa suggests, why not do the opposite logical derivation? Or perhaps go this way. There may be times when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance, dividing the estate with one other brother. And there may be times when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance, dividing the estate with 5 brothers. Therefore, just as when a firstborn takes his portion, dividing the estate with one other brother, he receives a double portion of all the property. So too, when a firstborn takes his portion of the inheritance, dividing the estate with 5 brothers, he receives a double portion of all the property. This would be the different outcome. As the logical inference can lead to either conclusion, the law is determined in a different way by a derivation from a verse. The verse states, Deuteronomy 21:16, "Then it shall be in the day that he causes his sons to inherit." As the next verse spells out, "But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the hated wife, by giving him a double portion of all that he has." The former verse is ostensibly redundant. The additional verse is therefore understood as an inclusion. The Torah increased inheritance with regard to the brothers, indicating that the more brothers there are, the greater the portion they collect from the entire estate. Therefore, you should not reason in accordance with the final formulation in which the Brisa suggests that the firstborn inherits twice as much as all the other brothers combined, but rather in accordance with the first formulation, according to which the firstborn simply inherits twice as much as any other single brother, but that's the extent of his double portion. It's not that he's taking the majority of the estate. That would only happen in a case where there are 2 brothers total. Otherwise, he's just getting the biggest piece, but it's only twice as much as any other single brother. The Brisa reinforces this statement by citing additional verses. And the verse states, "And the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but inasmuch as he defiled his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, yet not so that he was to be reckoned in the genealogy as firstborn." We read that at 1 Chronicles 5:1. And the following verse states, "For Judah prevailed above his brothers, and the prince came of him, but the birthright was Joseph's." Very interesting. Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob. Jacob was eventually, his name was changed to Israel. That's why we're all the children of Israel. But the firstborn was Reuben. Reuben lost the privileges, the rights of the firstborn because of the incident of something happened with his father's wife Bilhah. And it angered his father very much, and he took away the right of the firstborn. Who did he give it to? Joseph. But was Joseph then reckoned like the firstborn of all the sons? No. Yes, Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, were elevated to the status of their uncles as one of the tribes of Israel, or as 2 of the tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. But even though Jacob, and in that sense, Jacob gave Joseph a double portion among his brothers. But we don't call Joseph the firstborn. If anything, says the Bible, much later, right, much in the time of Kings, right, with the book of Chronicles, we say that Judah was elevated to that status. Why? Because King David emerged from Judah. But let's keep reading. Now, the Brisa derives birthright, i.e., firstborn status, is stated here with regard to Joseph, and birthright is stated in another verse concerning the double portion with regard to the later generations. By giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the first fruits of his strength, the birthright, ha-bechorah, is his. That's Deuteronomy 21:17. So just as the birthright stated with regard to Joseph is double the property received by one inheritor, as the Gemara will explain, so too the birthright stated with regard to the later generations is double the property received by one inheritor. In other words, further evidence that the oldest brother gets what is meant by his double portion is not that he personally gets 2/3 of the whole estate and all other brothers split the remaining third, but rather that he gets a portion which is twice as big as all the other single portions that his brothers receive. The Baraisa cites an additional related verse, and with regard to Jacob's bequest to Joseph, the verse states, quote, "Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow." That's Genesis 48:22. And the Baraisa explains the verse. But is it so that Jacob took the portion with his sword and with his bow? Did Jacob go to war and conquer, some land and take it as his own and then distribute that among his sons? We don't have an incident like that in the Bible. What's going on? But isn't it already stated, through you, meaning God, through you, God, do we push down our adversaries? Through your name do we trample those that rise against us? For I trust not in my bow, neither can my sword save me. That's Psalm 44, 6-7. Now, in light of recent events, we certainly turn to God first. We pray for God's help, but we also ask God to establish the work of our hands. And, Israel doesn't have the luxury to sit and wait for a miracle. They have been defending themselves with their sword and with their bow. However, Israel is not going out there like empire building and taking over neighboring lands. Israel is defending itself, so that's a very different matter. So what's going on here? Rather, says the Gemara, what is the meaning of with my sword? This is referring to prayer. And what is the meaning of with my bow? This is referring to petition. And this concludes the Baraisa. This is not a current events class about what's going on in Israel. May there be peace soon, please God, with a secure and lasting peace. Please God, may it be soon. But it is worth saying that everyone has to stand their post, and some stand their post with weapons of war, and others stand their post with a Gemara. Torah learning, hours and hours and hours every day. And God forbid Torah learning should ever cease from Israel, because then we'd be truly vulnerable. But the people who are learning in yeshiva all day long, they are doing something incredible to preserve the safety of Israel. And that's something I believe with all my heart. Continuing, the Gemara analyzes the Baraisa. What is the reason that the Baraisa cites additional proofs, introducing them with the term, and the verse states? So the Gemara explains, and if you would say that the proof from the verse, then it shall be, in the day that he causes his sons to inherit, that this is not valid, as perhaps this verse comes to teach the law of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, that a father may designate property for whichever child he desires. Well, then come in here a separate proof. And the sons of Reuven, the firstborn of Israel, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. As Joseph's birthright was that his sons received two portions. Ephraim and Manasseh, right, came up to the level of the other sons of Jacob. So evidently the birthright of the firstborn is that he receives double the amount received by any other single inheritor. And if you would say that this is not a proof either, as we do not derive the meaning of the term birthright, bechora, from the similar but not identical term of his birthright, bechorato, or bechoraso, come and hear a proof from the term employed in the following phrase from the verse, but the birthright, vehabechora, was Joseph's. So the Gemara continues to explicate the biblical citations in the Baraisa. And if you would say that this is not a proof either, as concerning Joseph himself, from where may it be learned that his birthright was double the property received by any one inheritor? Come and hear a proof. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers. This is what Jacob said to Joseph, indicating that Joseph received one more portion than each of the other sons of Jacob. Rav Papa said to Abaye, why not say that the term one portion is referring to a mere palm tree or some other relatively small extra gift instead of a full equal share? How do we know that this was the additional double portion of the firstborn? And Abaye said to him, for you, i.e. to answer your question, the verse states, Ephraim and Menashe, even as Reuven and Shimon shall be mine. Genesis 48:5. So evidently, Joseph's children together received portions equal to that of Reuven and Shimon together, i.e. 2 full portions. These are all proofs of what we mean when we say that the firstborn gets a double portion, meaning he gets twice as much as any other brother. And if he's got one brother, then he gets 2/3 of the estate and the other brother gets 1/3. But if he's got 10 brothers, so then we're going to divide the estate into 11 portions. The oldest gets 2 of them, and the other brothers each get 11th of what's left. Or the other 11ths, right? 1 for each of them. New subject. Rabbi Chelbo and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Rabbi Chelbo asked Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, what did Jacob see that he took the status as firstborn from Reuven and gave it to Yosef? And Gemara wonders, what does he mean, what did he see? The matter is written explicitly in the Torah. Quote, but inasmuch as he defiled his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. We know what it was that Jacob saw that led to him taking Reuven's firstborn double portion and giving it to Joseph. So rather, Rabbi Chelbo's question was, what did Jacob see that he gave that double portion which he took away from Reuven? Why did he give it to Joseph? Why Joseph? Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani answered Rabbi Chelbo, I will tell you a parable. To what is this matter comparable? To a homeowner who raised an orphan in his home. Eventually, that orphan became wealthy and said, I will provide benefit to the homeowner from my property. Similarly, since Joseph sustained Jacob in Egypt for a number of years, right? Once Joseph became the grand vizier, the second most powerful man in the whole world, particularly during a time of famine, when he told all his brothers to come and live in Egypt in Goshen and bring your father, right? Bring my father Jacob. And all the Jews came down into Egypt, and they all, lived very well, very comfortably, thanks to Joseph. So Joseph sustained the entire family. Not such a surprise that Jacob would be grateful to his son Joseph for that. Forget that Joseph was always Jacob's favorite, but now that Joseph, paved the way and basically saved everyone's life and installed them comfortably in Egypt and sustained them for many years via his position in the government. Okay, so that's what Jacob is grateful for. Similarly, since Joseph sustained Jacob in Egypt for a number of years, Jacob saw fit to repay the kindness. Rabbi Chelbo said to him, and if Reuven did not sin, would Jacob not have provided any benefit to Joseph? It cannot be that Jacob repaid Joseph only as a result of Reuven's sin. Since we're saying this came about because Reuven did something wrong, and that's why Jacob took that double portion and gave it to Joseph, are we going to say that, well, if Reuven hadn't sinned, Jacob wouldn't have given some extra measure of reward to Joseph? Would he have created 2 firstborns? What's going on? Rather, says Rabbi Chelbo, doesn't your teacher, Rabbi Yonason, say like this? It was appropriate for the child receiving the status of firstborn, right, ending up with the firstborn status, to emerge from Rachel. As it is written, Genesis 37:2, these are the generations of Jacob, Joseph, blah, 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 blah. Right? Why would we introduce the story of Joseph by saying, these are the generations of Jacob? Joseph did such and such and was such and such. If we're going to be talking about the generations of Jacob, you might have thought we would start talking about Reuven, his firstborn, long before Reuven committed a sin. Why are we right away talking about Joseph? This indicates that Joseph was Jacob's primary progeny. But Leah, right? Leah, it was Rachel's sister who ended up marrying Jacob first. But Leah advanced ahead of Rachel with appeals for mercy, i.e. with prayer, and thereby earned the status as firstborn for her firstborn. Reuben was the firstborn because Leah somehow skipped ahead of Rachel. And we know that Jacob was in love with Rachel and Rachel was in love with Jacob. How does he end up marrying Leah first and then having a firstborn son through Leah first, right? That her firstborn was the firstborn period. Reuben, if he's so in love with Rachel, how does he end up marrying Leah? It's a whole story that we read in the book of Genesis. Let's see what's relevant here. Leah advanced ahead of Rachel with appeals for mercy, i.e. with prayer, and thereby earned the status as firstborn for her firstborn. But because of the modesty that Rachel possessed, the Holy One, blessed be He, returned the status as firstborn to her. And this is why Jacob gave the status as firstborn to Joseph. Leah prayed and prayed and prayed. We're going to read about what we're talking about, that Leah prayed. And that's how she ended up marrying Jacob. And she ended up marrying to have the firstborn of Jacob. But Rachel, her merit is like through the roof, as we're about to read. And because of that incredible merit, her son, her firstborn, ends up supplanting the firstborn of Leah as the firstborn of Jacob, where we see that Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, end up with the double portion, i.e. getting an equal status as the rest of Jacob's sons, even though they're his grandsons. So let's read. So first, what does it mean that Leah advanced ahead of Rachel with mercy? As it is written, Genesis 29:17, and Leah's eyes were weak, rakot. So what is the meaning of rakot? If we say that her eyes were literally weak, is it possible that the verse would say that? The verse there did not speak to the disparagement of even a non-kosher animal, as it is written, from the pure animals and from the animals that are lacking purity. Right? If we're not going to even be disparaging in the way that the Torah describes non-kosher animals, simply saying that they lack something, but we're not saying that there's something wrong with them. They just don't have the status of the kosher animals. Are we going to then say that her eyes are weak, like to say that there's something wrong with her? That Gemara is going to turn that around. No, it's not that this weakness of the eyes was somehow a critique, that there's something wrong with Leah. Actually, it's praising her. Here's what it says. The verse states about kosher animals and non-kosher animals, that the non-kosher animals are lacking purity, rather than stating explicitly and disparagingly that they are impure. If that is so with regard to animals, all the more so with a human, right? So did the verse speak here to the disparagement of the righteous, someone righteous like Leah? Rather, Rabbi Elazar says, the term alludes to the fact that her gifts, i.e. the gifts given to her descendants, for example, the priesthood, right, because the Levites came from Leah, and Judah, who is the ancestor of King David, who's the ancestor of the Messiah, Mashiach. All of these came from Leah. So this term alludes to the fact that her gifts, i.e. the gifts given to her descendants, for example, the priesthood and the monarchy, were long-lasting, arukot, as they were passed down from generation to generation. Rav says that there is a different explanation of the verse. Actually, the verse means that her eyes were literally weak, and this is not a denigration of her, but it is also a praise of her, as she would hear people at the crossroads coming from the land of Canaan who would say, Rebekah has 2 sons, and her brother Lavan has 2 daughters. And the older daughter will be married to the older son, and the younger daughter will be married to the younger son. So she always heard that the two sons of Rebekah were destined to marry the two daughters of Lavan, the older with the older, the younger with the younger. So what does that mean for Leah? That she was destined to marry Jacob's older brother, Asaph, or in English, Esau. She was destined to marry Esau. Is Esau righteous? No, not at all. Right? According to the sages, Esau, very problematic character, in many ways wicked. And this was a bummer for Leah because she found out what Esau was like, and she was in desperation that she should end up married to such an unsavory character. Rav continues, and she would sit at the crossroads and ask, what are the deeds of this older son? And the passers-by would answer, he is an evil man, and he robs people. And she would ask, what are the deeds of the younger son? And they would answer, he is a quiet man dwelling in tents. That's Jacob, meaning learning Torah. And because she was so distraught at the prospect of marrying the evil brother, she would cry and pray for mercy until her eyelashes fell out. Since the weakness of her eyes was due to this cause, characterizing her eyes as weak constitutes praise. And this is Leah's prayer for mercy to which Rabbi Yonasan referred. And the Gemara comments, and her desire not to marry Esau is the basis of that which is written, quote, and the Lord saw that Leah was hated, and he opened her womb. Now, we normally understand that after Jacob married Leah, because her father, tricked him and put Leah forward on the wedding night with her veil on, and he slept with her, and then discovered in the morning, oh my God, I'm in love with Rachel. Why am I waking up with Leah? It's because I was tricked. And they say, yeah, well, we don't marry off the younger before the older. You have to marry both of them. And that's how he ends up married to both Leah and Rachel. But the one he loves is Rachel. So the Torah says elsewhere that, the hated one was Leah. So that's how we normally understood that she was the hated one. But here the Gemara is saying, no, we've been understanding it wrong. What is the meaning of hated? If we say that she was literally hated, is it possible? The verse there did not speak to the disparagement of even a non-kosher animal. So did the verse here speak to the disparagement of a righteous woman like Leah? Rather, the Holy One, blessed be He, saw that the behavior of Esau was hated by Leah. She didn't want to marry a guy who was evil. And therefore, he opened her womb because she cried so much and prayed so much that she would not marry such an evil person, that she would marry a righteous person. She ends up married to the righteous Jacob and bears many children by him, 6 boys, and a daughter Dinah at least, and in some sources they say there were even more children. Jacob said to her, and opened her womb. Now the Gemara explains the second part of Rabbi Yonasan's explanation. And what was a demonstration of the modesty that Rachel possessed? Because remember, so Leah merited to have the actual firstborn of Jacob, but Rachel, because of her extreme modesty, ended up having Joseph and Benjamin, and then Joseph ends up supplanting the actual firstborn, Reuven, and Joseph, is called by his father Jacob the firstborn. You are going to be my firstborn. I'm not going to give the double portion to Reuven. I'm going to give it to you. So what was it about Rachel that merited that her firstborn would actually end up becoming the real firstborn in Jacob's eyes? What was that about Rachel? And what was a demonstration of the modesty that Rachel possessed? As it is written, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. Genesis 29:12. Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother. Well, Rachel's father was Lavan. Jacob is Lavan's nephew, right, through Lavan's sister Rebekah. Why would he say that he is Lavan's brother? That's what's being asked here. The Gemara asks, but isn't he the son of her father's sister? Why did he say that he was her father's brother? Rather, Jacob and Rachel had the following exchange. Jacob said to Rachel, "Will you marry me?" Rachel said to him, "Yes." But my father is a deceitful person, and you cannot defeat him. Jacob said to her, "What is his method of deceit, which I need to be aware?" Rachel said to him, "I have a sister who is older than me, and he will not marry me off before he marries her off, even if he promises that he will." So Jacob said to her, "I am his brother," meaning I am equal to him in this deceit, and he will not be able to deceive me. And that is why Jacob said that he was her father's brother, meaning that he is able to, it's not that he's a deceitful person like Lavan, but that he's clever enough that he won't be defeated by Lavan in a game of deceit. Rachel said to him, "But is it permitted for the righteous to act deceitfully?" Jacob answered her, "Yes, in certain circumstances. As the verse states concerning God, with the pure you show yourself pure, and with the crooked you show yourself subtle." Right? The righteous person never acts crookedly. But when he's dealing with a crooked person, he can be subtle. He can be clever. That's from 2 Samuel 22:27. Therefore, to counter Lavan's deceit, Jacob gave Rachel secret signs to prove to him that she was the one marrying him. Right? Since Rachel told him in advance that on the wedding night, my father may try to, put forward my sister instead of me, Jacob said, "Okay, in the dark, the two of you really look alike, maybe sound alike, but I need to know that it's you. So I'm going to give you some secret signs, and then on the wedding night, you give me these signs back, the three code words, right? Then I'll know that it's you." So how does he end up marrying Leah and spending the night with her? And the answer is, it's not fully spelled out here. Let me just read what it says. Lavan did in fact attempt to have Jacob marry Leah instead of marrying Rachel. When Lavan's associates were bringing Leah up to the wedding canopy to marry Jacob, Rachel thought, "Now my sister will be humiliated when Jacob discovers that she is the one marrying him." Therefore, Rachel gave the signs to Leah. And this is as it is written, "And it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah." The verse is difficult, as by inference, should one derive that until now she was not Leah? Rather, through the signs that Jacob gave to Rachel and that Rachel gave to Leah, Jacob did not know that it was Leah in his wedding bed that night rather than Rachel until the morning. This is the modesty of Rachel to which Rabbi Yonasan was referring. Now, it's not fully stated here in this Gemara, but this is one of the great teachings that our Rabbi Yekusiel Kalmanson, has given over to us a few times. Here's the thing. Rachel didn't want her sister Leah to be humiliated on her wedding night, and like when Jacob realized it wasn't her, he's going to throw her out, right? So she gave Leah the signs. And then Leah was able to say to, her new husband, who doesn't really like her, who wasn't intending to marry her, she was just going to be, he's fond of her as a sister-in-law, didn't want to marry her. And he ends up married to her and then only discovers it the next morning. Now imagine that a woman who loves her groom, right? A bride who loves her groom so much as Rachel loves Jacob, but she doesn't want her sister Leah to be humiliated. So she gives her sister the signs so that her sister won't be humiliated and will end up being Rachel's co-wife with Jacob. So that's already an incredible act of loving kindness. But this is actually called modesty. They're talking about modesty. So there's one extra aspect to this that isn't stated in this Gemara, and I'm not sure whether Rabbi Kalmanson brought another source, and also I think added his own hiddush, his own novelty. Here's the thing: we also read later in the account in Genesis that Rachel asks, I think it's Reuven, these flowers or these fruits that you bring, these dudayim, they seem to make your mother very fertile. Leah's having one baby after another, and poor Rachel just hasn't conceived any children. Leah's already had 4 kids, I think. Rachel hasn't had any. And so she says, can you share those, those fruits that make a woman more fertile with me? And Leah freaks out and says, it's not enough that you stole my husband. Now you want to steal my son's dudayim as well? These herbs, these plants? Steal my husband? Now, it's true that Jacob loves Rachel more than Leah, and Leah feels that Jacob cares much more about Rachel than about Leah, because Jacob was in love with Rachel before. He's never really in love with Leah. Over the years, they formed a wonderful marriage, I hope. But really, Jacob's love was for Rachel. But if Leah's going to say, you stole my husband? What do you mean stole? I gave you your husband, is what Rachel could have said at that moment. Did she say that? No, she didn't say that. But doesn't Leah know it? Doesn't Leah know that Rachel gave Leah these secret signs, these code words for the wedding night? And how could she say that you're stealing my husband when she knows that Rachel gave her the husband? And the answer is Rachel did it in such a way that Leah didn't know that Rachel was making this incredible sacrifice. She gave her the code words, which were what? Kashrus, Shabbos, and Nida, right? Candle lighting, kosher kitchen, and marital laws. That a woman immerses in a mikvah before the husband and wife get together after her menses. Those were the 3 signs. And Rachel didn't say to Leah, these are the secret signs that you need to know on the wedding night so that my husband will think it, so that Jacob will think he's marrying me. What Rachel said to Leah was, know that you are marrying into a very distinguished family, the grandson of Abraham, the son of Isaac, that there's a tremendous tradition in this family, and that they are destined to give rise to this people, the Jewish people, and that Jewish women need to know these 3 signs, that these are the practices that distinguish Jewish women from non-Jewish women. So you need to know these things because they're important, not because these are the secret signs so that he won't throw you out of the bedroom. So Rachel not only did this tremendous kindness, but didn't make her sister feel bad about it, so that as a bride, she could go with joy to her wedding night. That was the unbelievable modesty and kindness and gentle lovingness of Rachel. That's why Rachel, and even when she was accused, when Leah later said to her, and now you're stealing my husband? Now you stole my husband? Now you want also to steal my son's dudayim? And still Rachel kept her mouth shut and didn't, in her anger, go off on her sister. Steal your husband? I gave you. No, she didn't say anything like that. A person who can hold their temper in a moment like that because she knows that even though she's been hurt, she's not going to exercise the power to hurt someone that she loves so much, her own sister. That's a very special soul and a very amazing lesson for us to learn from. New subject. The Gemara continues its discussion. By the way, I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara continues its discussion of Jacob's family. Abba Khalifa Karoya asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba, in the total tally of Jacob's family members who descended to Egypt, you find 70. As stated in the verse, all the souls of the house of Jacob that came into Egypt were 70. By contrast, in their individual listing, when the family members of each of his sons are listed by name, you find 70 less 1. How can this be resolved? And Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said to him, a twin sister was born with Dinah, as it is written, and ve'et, his daughter Dinah, Genesis 46:15, and the term et implies an unspecified additional person. Abba Khalifa Karoya replied, if that is so, one would have to say that a twin sister was born with Benjamin, as it is written, and he lifted up his eyes and saw et Benjamin, his brother, his mother's son. Genesis 43:29. We're on page 123b now. We're just going to get a start on this page, which would render the count of 70 incorrect. Which would render the count of 70 incorrect. Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said, there was a goodly pearl, margalit, in my hand, and you are trying to have me lose it. He continued, so said Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, this missing 70th person is Yocheved, whose conception was on the journey to Egypt as the family of Jacob descended toward Egypt, and she was born within the walls, i.e. in Egypt. Her mother got pregnant, Levi's wife, got pregnant on the way to Egypt, and Yocheved was born in Egypt. Yocheved is Moses' mother. As it is stated, and the name of Amram's wife was Yocheved, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. Numbers 26:59. Her birth was in Egypt, but her conception was not in Egypt. Accordingly, the family had 70 persons upon arrival, but she could not have been listed as descending to Egypt. Rabbi Chelbo asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, it is written, and it came to pass when Rachel gave birth to Joseph, that Jacob said to Lavan, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. Genesis 30:25. What was different when Joseph was born that Jacob decided only then to return home? Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said to him, Jacob, our patriarch, saw prophetically that the descendants of Esau will be delivered only to the hand of the descendants of Joseph. As it is stated, quote, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for straw, and they shall kindle in them and devour them. Obadiah 1:18. Jacob had left Eretz Yisrael to escape Esau, but he now felt confident that he could return without endangering his family through this prophecy. Rabbi Chelbo raised an objection to Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani concerning a battle between the Jewish people and the nation of Amalek, who descend from Esau. The verse states, quote, and David smote them from the twilight even to the evening of the next day, 1 Samuel 30, verse 17. David was from the tribe of Judah, yet he was able to defeat the descendants of Esau. Wasn't only Joseph who could defeat the descendants of Esau. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said to him, whoever read and taught prophets to you did not read and teach writings to you. As it is written, as he went to Ziklag, there fell to him of Menashe, Adnah, and Yozabad, and Jediel, and Michael, and Yozabad, and Elihu, and Zilithai, and captains of thousands that were of Menashe, and they helped David against the troop. That's from 1 Chronicles 12, verses 21 and 2. So the verse in writings teaches that David's campaign against Esau was led by who? Descendants of Joseph, i.e. from the family of Menashe. Rav Yosef raises an objection. Another verse indicates that the descendants of Shimon also had the ability to defeat the descendants of Esau, and some of them, even the sons of Shimon, 500 men, went to Mount Seir, having for their captains Pelatiah and Neariah and Raphiah and Uziel, the sons of Ishi. And they struck the remnant of the Amalekites that escaped and dwell there until this day. 1 Chronicles 4, verses 42 and 43. And Rabbi bar Shelah said in response, Ishi came from the children of Menashe, as it is written, and the sons of Menashe, Hefer and Ishi. Therefore, it was always with the descendants of Joseph that Asaph was defeated. That concludes our learning for today. Let me take a few questions. While my Google page reloads. Joseph, is this double portion language similar to when Elijah gave a spiritual double portion to Elisha? That's a great question. I would have to look at that. I mean, it's definitely different, right? So Elisha was not a son of Elijah. He was a helper, a student, a chassid, right, of Elijah. And then Elisha became a prophet in his own right. He was very scared to step into that role. He really was happy just being a servant of the great prophet Elijah. And then Elijah said, listen, it's time for me to go. And Israel needs a prophet, and you're it. You know? And don't be afraid, because I'm going to give you this double portion. So it's similar. I don't know what we learn by that similar language. I'd have to look at the Hebrew to see how similar it is. But we're not really talking about inheritance there. But I guess maybe what's related is this idea that a father, doesn't have to give the double portion to the firstborn. He can make a different allotment if he wants, and his will stand. He should give the double portion to the firstborn, and in the absence of a will, that's how we're going to distribute. But we've seen, and we're going to come to it later, right? Yochanan ben Baroka says, well, if a father wants to do different, he can. So in that sense, Elijah can, distribute this gift how he wants. On the other hand, is a prophet able, to distribute the gift of prophecy? I would assume only if God tells him he can do that. Because obviously God is involved in who God is going to speak to. It's not like the previous prophet just picks the next prophet. God picks who's going to have prophecy. But presumably God told Elijah, you can give this extra portion of prophecy to Elisha. And finally, Bill, very true on inheritances. In the early days of feudalism, it was different. Everyone got the same amount, which was a disaster from the nobility perspective. It's how you got civil wars when a younger brother decided he was a better lord or duke or king. Actually, it's how Charlemagne's empire was dissolved. The land of the emperor or senior brother got less and less each generation. By generation 3, it was a free-for-all, and that's why they instituted that the oldest one would get everything, and those younger sons, would be kind of out of luck. One thing that was interesting, for example, is Henry VIII, who ended up becoming, a really powerful and effective. Forget all his, emotional issues with marriage, in terms of having power and making England strong and educating his successor, Elizabeth, to be a strong ruler. He was very, very successful. But Henry VIII never expected to be king of England. He was not the oldest. He was not the first son. And he was a little bit like Prince Hal, right, in Shakespeare, having his fun while his brother was getting ready to rule. His brother died, and then suddenly, Henry is thrust into that role, ends up becoming Henry VIII, and perhaps, not being brought up to take the throne helped him when he finally did. But this is all just to talk about this idea that in British feudal times, primogeniture was much bigger in terms of the oldest got everything. But now we've seen what the double portion means, twice as much as each of the other sons, but not more than that. That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.